Well, hey class, we're at the end of week one, and I just wanted to touch upon a couple things and clarify a couple things. Um, First of all, I am stuck in the world of Microsoft, so I only have Word, and some of you submitted your assignments on Pages, which I believe is an Apple word processing product. So if you're going to turn in your assignments, could you either convert it to Word, or if that doesn't work, convert it to a PDF, and then I can read it in a PDF form. But I can't open Pages. So if you submitted Pages, could you please resubmit, maybe through email, the same assignment saved as a PDF or a Word file? Okay, here's the second thing I wanted to touch on, and that is the essay on biblical interpretation and cultural interpretation and what they have in common. Um, a number of people had a little bit of confusion with those terms, and I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And I'm going to use the picture here. Now, this picture is the map explaining biblical interpretation, but I want to use it for a different purpose. I just want you to see this. Imagine you're standing on the bridge right here. And as you look over here, this is the world of the Bible. This is Bible Town. And as you turn and look over here, this is our modern world. This is our culture. Okay. Now, when it comes to biblical interpretation, you're facing in this direction, and you're using the principles of hermeneutics to get back to what the author intended, right? Then, if you remember, if you've had studying and teaching the Bible, if you've read the Hendricks book, there's a real simple three-step process in Bible study. There's observation. What did the author write? What does it say? Then there is interpretation. What does it mean? That's what we're getting into in this whole class. And then the third step is application, where you take the principles here and you apply them over here. But to apply them over here, you need to actually do some interpretation of the culture, even though you live in it. So, some of you, I believe, thought that biblical interpretation and cultural interpretation were both referring to ways to interpret the Bible. I think you were thinking that the biblical interpretation is you get to its literal meaning, and cultural interpretation of the Bible is that you put on some cultural glasses and then you interpret the Bible through those cultural glasses. That is not how we're using the terms. Biblical interpretation is interpretation of the Bible. Cultural interpretation is interpretation of the culture that you live in, so you can then apply, you're doing application, apply the principles of the Bible to the culture. But it is not a form of Bible interpretation. Now, if those terms get confused, it's going to be very confusing for you. So keep those two things separate, even though they overlap and there's many things in common. Cultural interpretation is interpreting the culture. Okay. Let me also just make a couple of comments on how to do cultural interpretation. I think we have to first of all realize that even though we live in a culture, we may not be aware of how much we have bought into the culture. So learning to step back and objectively observe the messages in that culture is a real skill. And those are the 10 steps that Van Hooser gives us at the end of his first chapter. Studying those and trying to do those things in our culture is a real skill. I think another thing that might be confusing is that the word text is used of both biblical interpretation and cultural interpretation. I think we all know what we mean by a Bible text, but a cultural text is a message that our culture is communicating, but it might not be in spelled out words. Movies are texts with a message. Songs are texts. Billboards are texts. Memes on the internet are texts. So because that word text is used, I think some of you thought it was talking about the Bible, but text is used by Van Hooser of the meaning, the messages of the culture. Okay. Now, one last thing, and you'll read about this as we get into interpretation further. Realize that we live in a society that is becoming more and more postmodern. Now, postmodernity says we can never really get back to the original intention of the author. Therefore, why even try? Just read into it whatever it means to you. Since we can't bridge this river, this gap, just go ahead and whatever it means to you is fine. That's a valid means of interpretation. Well, I think if we buy into that fully, we're lost. How can we know what God's word says if we're so separated that we really can't get into it? So we need to acknowledge that there is a river here, but please don't buy into the full postmodern idea that we can't at all get back to the original author's intention. Now, I think we also need to be careful that we don't buy into postmodernism in interpreting cultural texts. I think sometimes we can be so quick to say, oh, I saw a movie. Well, what was the message? I don't know, but what it meant to me was, or what this song means to me is, or what that person said, and what he said was this, and what I took it to mean was, now wait a minute, just as we need to try to get back to the original intention of the biblical author, I think in all fairness, we need to try to get to the intention of our cultural text's author. So an example of this, one of you wrote your post on the song by the Beatles, Let It Be, Paul McCartney. And I remember once looking that song up on one of those websites that tries to interpret the lyrics. And there was a little debate going back and forth. Somebody did say, well, Paul McCartney wrote this about his mother who had died and appeared to him in a dream. Another person said, no, it's about Mary in the Bible. Mother Mary comes to me speaking words of wisdom. Let it be. And in essence, Mary says when the angel appears, let it be. So a little debate went back and forth. What do the lyrics really mean? And somebody then wrote in and said, well, why can't it just be both? Well, only people in a postmodern society would say that. Now, if the author intended it to mean both, then that's valid. But I highly doubt that Paul McCartney meant it to be both. So we need to step back and say, not what does it mean to me or what does it trigger in me. We first want to say, what did the author of that text, that cultural text, intend for us to get out of it? All right. So we are through the first week. I enjoyed reading your papers. Look forward to weeks ahead. God bless. Keep warm. It's freezing here in Chicago.